I'll tell you my story. I was born in Germany. If I tell you when, you'll know exactly how old I am, right? But you'll find it out anyway. It's okay. We lived a normal life, like all of you. We went on picnics. We went to movies. I went to school. I had a mother, a father, a sister, and a brother. And the life was really basically probably the same than you are enjoying it here. Unfortunately, in 1933, if you studied a little bit of the history of it, a chancellor was voted in by the people. Always remember that, by the people. Adolf Hitler in 1933 took command over the country. I emphasize that because it wasn't a coup d'etat, but it was for the general population, like we have here, a vote. He very quickly put in rules and regulations to take away the freedom and the dignity of human beings. It was earmarked mainly towards the Jews, but it was also earmarked to the gypsies, handicapped people, anybody that didn't fit his blonde, blue-eyed Aryan type. He was against it. It's very important to know that I'm going to say a couple of German words. Deutschland über alles, which means Germany should be big again. And that's what he started to preach. And that's how he was able to go in. I mean, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. And one of the main things are, whatever he did, it was silence. No one spoke up. No one at all spoke up. It was okay. All right, with that, I'm going to tell you my story. As I said, I was born in Nuremberg, Germany. And if any of you have ever seen the Nuremberg with Spencer Tracy, which goes back a long time, if you haven't, I would say to you it's a masterpiece. It's really worthwhile watching. It's a tremendous movie. So here was 1939. My father was already arrested, which most of the men population was arrested for no reason. They weren't criminals. They didn't commit any crimes. They were just a Jew, a simple Jewish family. But he was arrested and he was sent to Poland to a camp. The camps, the concentration camps at that time was not like it was a year or 2 years later. There were still more holding camps rather than what it became. So here was my mother, who was with 3 children. And my mother was not an old lady. She was 33 years old with 3 children. And what was every mother's wants to do is to make her children safe and save her children. We lived in an apartment. We had a jewelry store in the old section of Nuremberg. The old section is still there. The jewelry store is not there. But the place where we were, it was. We were home and we were told we lived in a walk-up, 3-family walk-up. We lived on the 3rd floor, and we were told by some neighbors, my mother's name was Mrs. Brenner, or my maiden name is Brenner, they're going to come for you today. They're going to start arresting the women and children. What did my mother think? She wants to save her children. So there was a huge attic in the building, and my mother felt maybe we can go up there and we can save ourselves. And we went to the attic and we were there. I don't know for how long, maybe an hour and a half, when you heard the clumping of the boots and the boots. And it was ear piercing. I mean, I was a little girl, so I wasn't as panicked as my mother or my siblings. My sister was much older than I am. And sure enough, there comes the SS soldiers, pointed bayonets. I probably hid behind my mother's skirts because that's what a little person would do. And were they going to shoot us? Were they going to take us prisoners? We really didn't know. My mother was a very, very feisty woman, even at 33 or 34. She also happened to have been a Polish citizen. Even though we were all born in Germany and we lived in Germany, she always went on a Polish passport. And she literally talked herself out. Germany and Poland was not at war at that point, and she was able to talk herself out of it without killing us or taking us prisoners. We went back to our apartment, and it was the night of Kristallnacht, or the night of broken glass, where they broke everything in sight, synagogues, even churches. They threw people out of the window. They were just, it was horrible. When we came down to our apartment, which was a lovely apartment, they went in and they tore everything, but everything. The couches were slashed. We loved music. The record, at that time we played records. We didn't have CDs at that time, were broken in half and thrown all around. Things were thrown on the floor, and to add insult to insult, they even urinated all over the place. It was a pretty awful sight, but we were alive. So you pick up the pieces and you do the best you can. The next day, my mother, our store was also demolished and completely destroyed, but my mother felt maybe could go and take something out. We were not allowed to go by ourselves there, but we did have a guard that went with us, and the store was completely barricaded. Everything also was thrown down, and we were not allowed to take anything at all. I'm not even talking about jewelry, but not even some personal effects. Nothing. We were not allowed. We were told to go back to our apartment, which we did. And a couple of days later, again, whatever you hear from me, as much as evil permeated, there are always some good people still around. And we have to remember that. But a couple of days later, again, a neighbor said to Mrs. Brenner, they're going to come and get you now. They are ready to arrest you. And sure enough, they did. They came into the apartment, and we were not able to escape it, but we had to go. And they took us to jail. But don't think of a jail like there were cells all over. It was rather a holding place where hundreds and hundreds of women and young children, babies were there. The following day, they took us and put us into a cattle car. I'll show you a picture in a little bit. I'm sure, have any of you been to the museum? Any of you to down in the city, the Heritage Museum, or in DC? If you've gone, you know what I'm talking about. A sealed cattle car. No windows, no toilets, nothing. And we were cramped into them, babies and all kinds of things, and the smells, and it was really pretty awful. Even for a young person like I was only, 7 or 8 years old, it was pretty devastating. But there's always a but. I never felt the panic that an adult would be because my mom was with me, and mothers are supposed to keep their children safe. And that's what you think as a little person. We were taken into this cattle car to be deported because we were Polish citizens to Poland. And the cattle car went along to Poland. However, when we got to Poland, they said, we're not taking anybody. You cannot disembark. Well, at the time, we thought it was a tragedy because we wanted to get out of this confinement. We had no food, we had no water, we had no toileting, we had nothing. But of course, in retrospect, I'm here today, partly because they wouldn't allow us to disembark. So we went back to Germany, back to our apartment. But my mother still felt, my sister was much older than I was, and she needed her always to be by her side to talk or to try to help us. But she wanted to save the two younger children, myself and my brother. My father in Poland, in the concentration camp, a holding company, whatever you want to call it, had a visa to go to Holland. My mother's sister was a Dutch citizen, and he was able just to walk away. It wasn't hard to do that if you had a visa in your hand. They didn't shoot you on sight. It wasn't like it was a year or two later. And somehow they communicated, my mother and my father and my aunt, and my mother decided to put both of us, myself and my brother, on a train and send us to Holland, Amsterdam, Holland, to save us. So my mother gave me, I love dolls, so my mother gave me a beautiful doll and with a lot of clothing that I could amuse myself, and my brother loved to do all kinds of building and things. Of course, he became an engineer in later life, naturally, because he loved that. So he had actually, if any of you are probably all too young, erector sets. Are they still around? Okay. Well, my mother gave him that, and he was able to play for the couple of hours that we were on the train. Well, lo and behold, we got to Amsterdam, to the train station. They said we're not allowed to disembark. But my aunt, who was a Dutch citizen, she was allowed to come on the train to see us. So unbeknownst to us, she was a wonderful, wonderful storyteller. And she told me, your baby is so tired. She's had such a long journey. Let me take her and I will give you another doll. Didn't sound unreasonably to me at all. So I gave her my doll, and she basically said the same thing to my brother. You've played now for a couple of hours with the same toys. Let me give you something else. So she gave him that. We didn't know it at the time, when we probably didn't know it for many, 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 I don't know, maybe even years, I didn't know. My mother had built in jewels and certain things to give to my father. And because she did that, they sent us back. My mother got us back. She picked us up, and now she had her children back. But my father, being now that he had some funds on him, he wasn't destitute, he was able to engage smugglers. You've read, I'm sure, books about smugglers. A smuggler was basically, yes, he took your money, and he tried to smuggle basically people out over the borders. However, you never knew. Does he take your money? Does he betray you? Does he kill you? You didn't know, but you had no choice. So my father was able, being that he had some funds, because all without funds, forget it, you can't get any place, that he was able to get a smuggler. In the meantime, we did have some friends in Cologne, Germany. So we were asked to go to Cologne, which we did. We stayed there for a couple of weeks or so, and we were communicated on a pitch dark night to meet us at a certain forest where we will be met by these smugglers. It was scary, very scary. It was so dark, I mean, you could hardly see your hand in front of your face, but we met the smugglers, and again, I have to emphasize the fact, you didn't know, are they going to take us to a safe haven, or are they going to kill us, or are they going to betray us? And by the way, if they had accosted us and they had found us, not only would they have killed us on sight, but they would have killed him also. So even though it was for money, that he did this, his life was really in jeopardy. We walked and we walked and we walked. I don't know how long we walked in the pitch darkness until we came to a clearing. And in front of that clearing was a moving van. I mean, my mother must have looked, what is a moving van doing here? But we were told that we were going to go into this moving van. Now, the moving van in the front had furniture, just like a regular moving van. But in the back, a wall was built, and we were able to go behind that wall, even though it looked part of the truck, and we were put in there. Dark, dark, dark. We rolled along. We didn't know where we were going, but we knew we had to cross to get out of Germany and cross the border. You have to remember, Poland, Holland, a lot of the countries were not yet overrun by the Nazis. So you had you were arrested. If they saw you, they shot you on sight. But we still were able to cross if we were lucky enough. So we went along on this moving van, I don't know how long, until we again got to they told us that we were now in Holland. And at a point, they stopped at a farm and they told us we had to get out. Also, dark, 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 always dark. And we were told to get out. The farmer took us upstairs to an attic. Quiet. You have to be very, very quiet. No windows there. No light, really. You couldn't, because they did have neighbors all around. The farmer, again, I'm sure, was handsomely paid. However, if anybody betrayed the farmer that he was shielding Jews, he would have been shot, and his family. So again, even though it was monetary, their life was in jeopardy. We stayed there for a number of weeks, which I don't have to tell you, being confined, 4 people in an attic without ever seeing daylight was horrendous, but we managed. You somehow manage these things. You don't think you can, but you do. After a certain amount of time, the farmer said to us, the neighbors are getting suspicious. I see a lot of talk. It's no longer safe for you to stay here. So again, at an appointed time, we met him again. I don't know, I emphasized the darkness because it was so, so dark. In front of the farm was a hay wagon, huge hay wagon, with 3 or 4 horses, probably never 3, I guess 4. And we were told that we're going to go into this hay wagon. Well, I'm sure that my mother must have looked. The hay wagon was very, very high. And what happened is it was so high that all the way on the bottom, they built a platform for the 4 of us to go lie down on this platform. Obviously, they put in a couple of holes into the platform, otherwise we would have all suffocated. But the hay was in your nostrils, in your eyes, and your body. I mean, I remember that very, very well, but again, quiet, quiet, quiet. We rode along on the countryside, and of course we were stopped by soldiers, SS, Nazis, and they said to the farmer, "Where are you going?" So the farmer said, "Well, you see, it's hay. I'm going to the next farm to deliver the hay." Well, they took their pitchforks and they put their pitchforks into the hay. Who was looking after us? Maybe it was God. Maybe it was destiny. Maybe it was luck. They did not penetrate us. They were so high that what they hit was really hay, 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 and not us. So now we rolled along again. We were safe again for the moment. We came into another border, Belgium. Again, they were not at war yet. They were not at war. That's very important to remember. And the driver of the farm said, "I can't take you any further. You have to get out." Well, we got out. And he says, you see that bridge over there? When you cross that bridge, you will be in Belgium. So we got out, we went, but when you looked at the bridge, what was standing there? Full of soldiers with bayonets aimed at us again. Again, what goes through your head? Okay, I'm sure my mother said more so than on mine. That's it. This is it. We're finished. We're done with. But again, miracle of miracles. If you want to be think of an almighty up there, or if you want to think, I don't know. You can, I've talked a lot about that. These soldiers turned around and allowed us to cross the bridge. Was it empathy? Was it they saw a young woman with 3 children? Were they not going to kill them and shoot them? So they turned around. We were safe. We got into Brussels, Belgium, in a flea-bitten hotel. I mean, we had no papers. Now, we had no citizens. We had no rights. We were homeless in the sense we belonged no place. No place. We were illegally, basically, in Brussels. But it was all arranged what place to stay. And we were informed that at some point there will be some communications. My father, being that he did have funds because he got that, he was able to get passage to go to London. Now, London took in, well, they weren't so good about it, okay? They took in refugees, but each refugee, each person cost an enormous amount of money. Each one, no children, etc. So unless you had, I don't know, in town, actually I do have, believe it or not, we have all of that history that's all documented. We all have that when we came, etc., etc. But anyway, in the meantime, my father arranged passage just for us to get to England. And we were informed at one day to meet at this and this pier and this boat, and we're to go on it. Well, we all went on it, but as we were on the boat, again, you have to remember, we had no papers. We had the car, a passage, a ticket, but we had nothing else. My mother hears a loudspeaker, Mrs. Brenner, Mrs. Brenner. She thought, from the captain, that doesn't sound good. And she made believe she never heard it. Well, the boat finally left, and I guess she must have thought to herself, is the captain really going to take 3 children and a woman and throw them overboard? Hardly. But he didn't, obviously, and we did arrive in London, UK. We met my father for the first time in a year and a half, close to 2 years, and as I said, he was able to pay for the 4 of us. And my father was not only a watchmaker, but he also was a tool and die maker. War was imminent when we arrived. It was already imminent. And it was declared in September was the war. So he had no problems finding work because he was a skilled craftsman that they needed. So they did send us to Cardiff, Wales. Cardiff is the capital of Wales. And we did get housing, and we were in Cardiff. Now we were saved more or less from the Nazis, but we were there a very short time. The war broke out, and we had the Blitzkrieg, which was one of the first places, was Cardiff, Wales, where day and night, night and day, were bombs and bombs and bombs. Yes, I did go to school with my little gas mask, always, and where we had to practice every single day to put this on. And frankly speaking, you never knew when you came home from school, was your house standing? Were your folks alive? You never knew, because the bombs were all over the place. We stayed there 1 year, and then we did get a visa to come to America. We did have relatives in the United States, and we did get a visa to come to the United States. Again, at an appointed time, and we were probably the last boat to leave London to come to cross the Atlantic. It was not safe. Torpedoes, you didn't know. You went on there, you really didn't know if you're going to be blown up or not because it's all surrounded. We did have a convoy up to a certain point, and we did arrive safely in America. And fast forward now, I'm going to fast forward, and then I'm going to open it for questions and things like that. We did have relatives here. We lived in one room. We had no money, no clothing, nothing, zero, nothing at all. What we had on and the few pennies we had. But we did find a one-room apartment. One room, wasn't an apartment, on 72nd Street, I think. And we lived there for a number of months or whatever the case may be. My father, again, got employment because he was a craftsman, and they were needed. I mean, he was a very, very good craftsman. So he did find employment. We did eventually, with help, get an apartment, which we did in Washington Heights, if you know anything about Manhattan. And we did have a little apartment there. I went to, actually I started in third grade in 155th Street, that's right. And from third grade, I went to middle school. Went from middle school to high school, from high school to college, and down the line. We were one of the lucky ones. My aunt was betrayed with Anne Frank at the same time in Holland. She went to Auschwitz. She had a son. She has a son who she gave away as a 4-year-old to complete strangers, to a farmer. She didn't know him. But as I said, she was such a wonderful storyteller. She said, oh, you're going to see animals, and you're going to see this, and you're going to see that, that she was able to give this 4-year-old child away. But she did, because what does the mother want to do? Save her child. She was in Auschwitz until she was liberated. Her husband was also in Auschwitz, but at the very end, before liberation, there was what is called the Death March. He was on one of them and was murdered. The little boy was luckily saved, and he was taken in what they had called foster parents, and he was alive. He is alive today. He lives in Israel. From one child, he has maybe 10 or 12 grandchildren. And I always say that was our revenge, that Hitler couldn't do that. The same way I have 3 children. I got married, and I have 3 children. I pursued a lifetime of education with young children because I never had a childhood. So somehow that was important for me. I worked actually until about 10 years ago. I was working, and I have 10 grandchildren, and I have 6 great-grandchildren, and they live very close to me, and I'm one of the lucky ones, and I'm blessed, and I'm grateful my whole life. I always get a little teary when I talk about my aunt and the little boy, because being that I could just see it, I mean, how can you give a 4-year-old away to strangers? But she did. What's my message to you? What are we learning from this? We all know you're all high school students. So you're all reading and knowing what's going on in the world today. And not anti-Semitism, is on a rise. And what is going on with Israel, with the hostages? I mean, you're not, you are adults, basically, young adults. And you ask yourself, some of the rhetoric that I hear and I'm not going to be political because that's not my place, all right? But the rhetoric you hear sometimes is very similar to what Hitler was speaking about. He's going to make Germany great again. And by that he meant going into Poland, going into France, going into Austria, going in and taking them like a piece of cake, just taking them. What happened with Ukraine? I mean, again, I am not political. This is not my job. That's for you guys to figure out. So I say to you, silence is the way Hitler was able to get where he got, because people did not speak up. That's important. It's also important as young people. You see something going on in your classroom. Somebody bullies you. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to be the oddball. Don't be afraid of that. That's the only way that we can do a little bit of our job. The reason I am not a youngster, as you all know, and last year I think I spoke to 30 schools. And sometimes people ask me, why are you doing this? Why? This is my obligation. I'm here. 6 million of my brethren are not here. Oh, God, don't mind me. This happens to me. You know, I'm talking already, 30 years or 25 years. It happens to me every time. I'm okay. It's just the memories I've been blessed with really a wonderful, wonderful memories. So when I talk to you about the moving van or the thing, it's right in front of me. I mean, it's almost, I can see it. It's been a privilege to talk to you. Go home, or if you stay here, talk to your friends and your parents of my story. Keep it dialogue. Not. You don't have to be right. They don't have to be wrong. That's not it. Dialogue, communication. That's what it's all about. That's what we need to do. I'm going to open it for questions, and then I have some pictures to show you. You know, we were a practicing Jew in the sense we were not a Shomer Shabbos, if you know what that means, and but we did celebrate all the holidays, and we were a Jew. Thank you. Okay, that's what I was looking at. Usually don't do that, but it happens sometimes. But they're really also tears of joy that I'm here to speak to you. How has it changed? When we came here to America, we still celebrated the holidays, and we still belonged to a shul or a synagogue. As I grew older, I have to admit I had a lot of questions. How can if I may say so, how can someone, a God, allow this? How can somebody allow a Mengele, who is a doctor, Hippocratic oath, number two, he has a family. He went in to pet his dog and play with his children and go outside and take a baby and throw it into the fire. How can that be? How? I mean, we're not talking about all demented, schizophrenic people. We're talking for highly educated people that listen to beautiful Beethoven, that enjoy art. That's another question you should ask yourself. To remember the dates is unimportant. Ask yourself, how could this happen? How could people turn against people for no reason at all? Animals only kill when you go on their territory, or they threaten their cubs, or they threaten their food supply. You know, so when people usually say to you, like, compare you to an animals don't kill randomly. I don't know if that answered. I have worked in Jewish education practically my whole life. And it was not because I chose that. I just fell into it. I started a program for young children, and I had 4 children. And before I left, I had over 300. So it was a pretty big school. I had a staff of 30, and I loved every minute of it. I think I was one of the most innovators in Mamaroneck, whoever lives in Mamaroneck, America, Westchester Jewish Center.
Yes.
You'll know it right away if you live in Mamaroneck. But again, like I said, I wanted to be with young children. For me, it was a pleasure to go and buy toys for them because I never had it. I was almost like buying it for myself. Okay, but I question a lot of it, and I am concerned about today's times. Very concerned. Not so much for myself. I'm too old. I don't consider myself old, by the way. But for my children, not even so much for my children, for my grandchildren. I have 4 babies. They're all 2 and under, a 4-month-old. What kind of world are we going to leave to them? What kind of world? I don't know if that answers you.
Thank you.
I have been always a very positive, obviously not as an 8-year-old child, but I have always found something good in most situations or tried to do something about the situation. I loved having children. And of course, my first granddaughter was like, again, it was a revenge. Now, here I am, and they were giving birth to these children. So I'm hopefully that my children will say that I was very attentive to them. I'm sure I made many mistakes, like every other human being. I loved having grandchildren, and actually most of my 10 grandchildren all went through my school. So I had the pleasure of having them really for 2-3 years in my school, which was very nice. And I've enjoyed just being a mom, a grandmother, and I love being a great-grandmother. I'm a little bit now, I'm sorry to say, I can't get on the floor quickly and pick them up. That's a little hard for me, but I love being with them. We're doing as much as we can to keep it alive, to know that unless we're vigilant, don't kid yourself. It can happen right here. It can. I hope to God never, but it can. What I think my wish, and I think I talked about it, is that you are the makers of the future. You are our future. No matter what avenue, where you're going, doctors, lawyers, electricians, plumbers, whatever it is, you are the future. And the only thing that, be informed, don't be silent. Even if it's an unpopular thought, never offensive. You never have to be offensive. You never have to scream and yell or fist fight or any of that. Communication is so much more powerful to convince somebody of something in a positive way, almost in a debate. That's power. Not power is to put out on the media some of these horrible statements that's not powerful, but don't be silent. Think in terms of the broader picture. Think in terms of more so, yes, you're comfortable. You probably live in a lovely house. You have nice clothing. You're attending a beautiful school. That's a privilege. There's no question about it. That's a privilege. Go a little bit beyond that. Be good to your fellow man. Be kind. Even in the littlest things, you can be kind. You can always be kind. You don't have, I'm not saying you should be a pussycat, that you should just let everything ride over. No, you have to talk up also when it's wrong. But you can be kind in very small ways. I think that's it. That's being a human being. That you contribute something to this world. I'm hoping that I must have spoken at least to 1,000 students, maybe even more. I mean, I'm hoping that I have touched, even if I touch 2 or 3 in a classroom, I've done something. I hope I've done something. That's my message. Thank you very much. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. This is a privilege, and I'm so happy. I've never been to Harvey School. Beautiful, just a very beautiful school. You're very, very welcome. Well, I applaud each and every one of you for being involved and informed. And as I said, you're fantastic. I love you all. Only a good life.